Helo, cyn yma haisef. Ha yfwyn lefra bwynsiach agus droch anju. Hello, hope you're okay. I'm going to be talking about books on witchcraft and magic today. And these are going to be books which are massively influential in witchcraft in Scotland of the modern era, that really sort of changed the views on witchcraft from what were seen as a quite demonic, negative connotation to something that was now within the last century and with we're into the 20th and the 21st century as something romantic and something that was fantastical, to the reader, about stories about witches and their practices, and really moves from the world of persecution and law into folklore. So the first book I'm going to talk about in the Scottish context is this book here, which one of my gems, I bought recently. It is the first edition, but it's been rebound in the 80s, of Walter Scott's letters on demonology and witchcraft to J.G. Lockhart, which was published in 1830, and it's beautiful. This is, I believe, the house that would stand on Victoria Street, in Edinburgh, of the famous John Wyer, the conjurer of Edinburgh. It's beautiful and it's quite a rare book. Although it's not its original condition, this marble effect here is certainly part of the original cover. And what's even more rare with it is that when it was purchased at the time in 1830, you got this that came with it, which is a booklet of the illustrations referring to the 12 illustrations referring to the 12 chapters in the book. And this is really rare that you even get this as well as that book, or even getting that book as well. And it's so beautiful. Some of the illustrations, they remind me a bit like, the original book on Alice in Wonderland's illustrations. So you have like the fairies attacking a woman. You have the devil making elf arrows. It really is stunning. I'll probably take on Instagram and Facebook like pictures of each 12 illustration, and post them up for people to see. But yeah, what Walter Scott, this is really influential to how, and really changed the views of the public in Scotland of how people viewed witches, and really changed it from, like I said, the land of persecution and into the world of folklore and interest. So what essentially Walter Scott is doing is rehashing a lot mostly from King James's demonology, which is kind of like started from the accounts, or the North Berwick witch trials, which was a news article, which pamphlet, sorry, which is news from Scotland, and then a year later, or give or two, he published demonology, and it's basically what witches to do and like a small wee manual of witch hunting, and how diabolic it is. So and also what he's taken is popular accounts and stories, from the past of witches, but what he's doing, like Walter Scott is famous for, good and for bad, is romanticizing these old stories and these old views of demons and witchcraft. So it really changed, and because of that, it became really popular. I mean, at the time, in the 20th century, the mid to late 19th century, his works were already popular through the Waverley novels, which were basically the earliest Outlander. Waverley's novels were accounts of Highland men and romanticising Highland culture and Gaelic, and that changed the views from what people used to see Highland culture as something very negative, since the Highland clearances and the Culloden battle. So what he did is he does that. So he's already a popular sort of in literature at this time that people were reading. So when they're reading like letters on demonology and witchcraft, it really changed their views. And so the no longer people were scared or paranoid, they were kind of fascinated about witchcraft, and they loved to collect little stories and something that they could tell. So yeah, that was the first thing. And then what led on after that, which is another one that was one of the classics that were really influential of the modern era, is which I don't have. I mostly look it online because it's free on sacredtext.com or archives.com. Is Witchcraft and the Second Sight in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland by John Gregerson Campbell. And that is published works of things that some from the Carmen Icadalica he's took, but his accounts, what he's collected around the Hebrides and the Highlands, are accounts of of witchcraft and second sight and folk magic. And that was again like a kind of the blending of now like people are interested in Highland culture and Gaelic and stuff, and then also putting the mix of the ideas of witchcraft and magic and second sight. So that was quite a popular, which was the 1905 or something, like the early 19th century, 1900, sorry. But after that, what become the next, which it's really sad because there was not much about him at the time, and I don't think it was a popular seller back when it was, but now it's like up there as the classics is Rowan Tree and Red Thread by Tom Davison. Sorry about that, I've got dry throat. Tom Davison. So it's Rowan Tree and Red Thread, Scottish witchcraft miscellaneously, tales, legends, and ballads, together with description of witches' rites and ceremonies by Thomas Davison. And at the time, there was nothing much known about him, and still isn't. So, but it is up there now as one of the classics of Scottish witchcraft and folk magic in the modern era, in the 20th century. So yes, and then it's brilliant, and I have spent years constantly checking since I was 18, just checking the internet every so often to see if there was, and finally I did. It wasn't cheap, that's for sure, and it's in brilliant condition. I've seen some, like even at libraries and stuff, or people's personal collections, where it's quite, the dust cover is quite ripped, but whoever had this previously really looked after it. And yeah, he's sort of not the first people to sort of put together accounts about witchcraft and their rituals and whatever. But so, like, because as we said, John Gregerson Campbell did that, but it was more focused within the Gaeltacht areas, Gaelic speaking areas of Scotland, and more Highland culture, where he is discovering it's not just Highland culture, it's in many cultures in general around Scotland. So yeah, it's a brilliant book, and I'm so pleased that finally I could get a copy of it, because it really is rare and one of them gems up there. And what precedes it as well, which I feel was inspired by Thomas Davison, and was quite a well-known author at the time, was Fiona Fiona Marison McNeil, and she was writing at the time for Scottish cookbooks and rhymes and stuff. And then she came out, she published the Silver Bough, this first one in, I believe, so this was in 1949, and I believe this was published in 57 or something like that. First published. Hang on, let me check. Yeah, 1957. And I believe there's a lot that you can see apparent that she has took a lot of inspiration from Thomas Davison, because you can even down to some chapters like witches and mission rites, and the covens and organizations, and a lot of material you see in his book is rehashed into his. And that was the first book, and then it became a series going on to local, which I'm yet to have a full collection. I'm still waiting for the originals of them to be available. but yeah, it went on to then three other more, which are about local festivals around Scotland. You know, like Samhain. Um, you'll go like Candlemas to Beltane and whatnot. And there really it is. And then there's the last one is about local festivals, talking about the Borryman Festival, talking about what happens at the Bodach and Tain and Bodach in Argyll, on Gyleshire and Perthshire. So yeah, like brilliant. And but poor Thomas, he wasn't as well famous like Fiona Marion McNeil was. But this became very influential. Like people, not just about witchcraft, but folk magic in general, and local festivals that around Scotland and recording them. So it became influential and still is one up there as one of the classics. So yeah, and then you see a lot. And yes, so basically as well, the Silver Bower was inspired. Sorry, it was inspired by James George Fraser, who did the Golden Bough, and he, it's rituals and folklore and all that in a more worldly focused, as opposed to being localized places, just in Scotland, and I guess that was inspired, and there is Celtic tales of the silver bough, and and then the golden bough in the classical world of Greek and Roman, which are associated with otherworldliness and like a kind of passport per se to the other world. I believe the silver bough within an Irish context, and I think some Welsh. It is a branch of oak or holly and oak or birch with silver bells that once rang would bring sweet tunes to people's ears and transform them into fairy world or whatever. And I'm not quite. I believe the golden bower bow in classical art, sorry, classical culture, with golden apples, which were again, a way of when you eat them, you transfer into like Hades, the land of Hades. Um, so yeah, there's a crossover culture there. So it really is that history of otherworldliness. But yeah, these books, and I'm glad to have copies that were so influential in both the material we see today, still written in books today, and my own inspirations on Scottish folk magic. From these books that really not only influential, but they changed the views in Scotland of how people saw spirits, how people saw demons and witches and magic, to something fantastical. And hey, I guess it's something, whether it's with a land of paranoia, fear, or pure fascination. I guess the interest in witchcraft and magic is embedded in our human psyche, and we can only see this of the whole big boom of Harry Potter. How the popularity of it. J.K. Rowling. She's done well. But it shows that the belief and the wanting to be fascinated by good or bad, how you feel about it, about witchcraft and magic, is still within our human psyche, and it's going to be forever still within our own culture and our countercultures and pop culture, and it certainly is still today within Scottish music and storytelling. And there's some great storytellers that I know that can tell these traditional stories and give a modern twist to them. And I think it's great because I always think if things like don't go with the times, they just fall in the land of archaea, archaea, say, of archaic past, and then decline. And so I always say about folk magic, it's great to take from the past and look at these old charms, but if you don't modernize them and have them that's relevant today, then the charms will simply go in decline, uh, or just become part of an antiquarian past. But yeah, I felt like I wanted to discuss about these books that were just influential at the time in the modern era, the modern times of witchcraft in Scotland, and witchcraft and magic in Scotland. And I hope you enjoy. And yeah, if you can, some of you may not be as lucky, and I am blessed to have these books, the originals. But do some are published online, so you can definitely find at archives.com and sacredtext.com, online of letters on demonology and witchcraft. You can find Witchcraft in the Second Sight in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland by John Gregerson Campbell, online at Sacred Text and archives.com. And I'm not quite sure, you can't so much Silver Bough because these are reprint, they've been recently reprint. But yeah, and also you can definitely view demonology um, online by King James VI. And again, unfortunately, there is nothing available online for viewing contents from Rowan Tree and Red Thread. But hey, there's always time. But yeah, that's just what I discuss, and I hope you've all enjoyed sort of listening to this, the legacy that makes witchcraft today has been, in the land of phantasm and fantastical and interest, and what it is today. It's due to these authors of the very modern era, or the Lime period. So yeah, I hope you enjoy Slanjiva.